Spence, a fun day downtown. Why don't we just dive right into it? What was your biggest takeaway of the day?
Well, I don't want to bury the lead here, Brendan, because every time I know Tommy and I do a podcast, we get somebody who's commenting and asking about, oh, Evan Mobley, Evan Mobley, Evan Mobley. Is he stronger? Does he look bigger? Has he bulked up this offseason? We finally, he's come out of the cave. We finally see him for the first time. I posted a picture out there on Twitter. But I mean, I don't know. From my perspective, I think last year we had the same conversation. We said, hey, he looks like he bulked up a little bit. And it seemed like he did the same thing this offseason where he looked like a little bit more physically stronger up there, talking to us at the press conference table. So I think I noticed that about him. And I think obviously one of the biggest storylines for this season is going to be just his development and what the next phase of that looks like. It was something that Kobe Altman talked about. It was something that JB Bickerstaff talked about. I think he himself and Mobley recognizes that he has some progress to make and that he's trying to take that next step as well. So we'll sort of see how that looks coming up in the next couple weeks. But I think as much as this season is about Donovan Mitchell and there's going to be constant talk about his future here, I think looking even beyond whether or not he's here long term, Evan Mobley is obviously at the center of what this team's going to do in years to come. So I know people wanted that answer. I'm giving it to you here. But I do think if you want to go back to the Donovan Mitchell thing for a second, because that was, I think, the elephant in the room, if you will, coming into today. The day started with Kobe Altman addressing his future, and he kind of said, listen, it's probably not going to be much coming from me as the general manager of the team, but it feels like to me he's bought in. And he mentioned he sort of vaguely that Mitchell played a role in some of the moves they made this offseason. But then Donovan admitted himself, like, yeah, I was making calls and linking up with some of these guys. And
just to say hi, not to tamper,
yeah.
just to check in. Hey, how's Christmas? What'd you get your kids this year?
Exactly. He was trying to avoid the fines from the NBA. But yeah, he flat out said, like, yeah, I was keeping in touch with George Niang, who was a teammate of his, obviously in Utah, and same thing with Max Strus. It was a guy he felt like could be a piece here. So I don't know. Listen, is he going to be here beyond next year? Is he not? We don't have a full-fledged answer at this point, but it definitely felt like a guy who, if he's helping make moves, and he talked a lot about how he feels like they're building something special here. It sounds like a guy who's trying to make the situation work, and we just got to kind of see how it plays out.
I have a couple thoughts on both those guys, so I guess we'll stay in that realm. So, first of all, the thing that you had referenced that Kobe and JB and Evan had all kind of talked about Evan. I felt like in some regard, everybody that came to the podium today was asked about Evan Mobley, and I thought it was important that it was pointed out both by franchise leadership, but also by players, that Evan Mobley, as now a 22-year-old, and it's sometimes hard to remind yourself that he's still only 22, that he has personally invested in a new nutrition plan and he hired a personal chef, that he personally invested in putting a new gym in his house because he wanted to show a commitment to getting stronger this offseason. So, you feel the buy-in. And look, I think he did look a little bit stronger. It's kind of hard to tell from one year to the next, but he's still at a phase of his career where maybe those things are a bit more noticeable. So, I have high hopes for Evan the same way everybody else does. Tristan Thompson said that, hey, the same way, Kendrick Perkins was constantly mentoring and tutoring me, I'm going to do the same thing for this guy. And I try to tell Evan Mobley, like, look, man, I think of you the same way I think of Anthony Davis. Like, you can be a top 5 player in this league. You need to act like it. You got to keep putting that work in. And by all accounts, he's doing the things on an everyday habitual level that make you think it's just a matter of time before it clicks. And so everybody seems to be, really high on a guy that, as such a young player, was clearly one of the best defensive players in the league last year and might ultimately become the best defensive player in the league by the time it's done. And then as far as Donovan Mitchell goes, look, you're right. The offseason chatter for so long was essentially, does he want to be here? And Kobe Altman made it pretty clear that just because Donovan hasn't signed an extension this offseason doesn't mean he won't, and that he could next offseason. And then on top of that, when Donovan got to the podium, he basically put to bed any rumors of like things that he would do the rest of this offseason and saying, look, I'm invested in where I am right now. We're trying to win right now. I thought he was politically correct in the way he described his future, but he also made it very clear that, hey, look, I have the ability to sign an extension next offseason. My lack of signing one now doesn't necessarily mean I'm taking the first train out of Cleveland at the end of the season. So I got the impression, the energy, the aura around Donovan Mitchell, that he really likes it here and he really wants to win here. And I don't know exactly what that will take for him to like make a firm decision one way or the other, but he is pretty invested in being here, trying to be at his best this year. And the reality is this team can win. I mean, they're good enough to win. They're good enough to be a legitimate playoff contender, albeit in an East that seems to keep getting stronger. So I'm encouraged by what I heard from those two today.
Yeah, I mean, I can't knock him for. I can't knock any players in today's NBA for keeping their options open. Like I think that's kind of the way he presented it, was like, hey, I can still sign an extension next off season, and I think that kind of points to what we already knew, which is, yeah, like I'm sure he is going to base a lot of what he wants to do in the future off of how this season goes, and if he thinks there's progress made and how they kind of progress moving forward, and if he thinks it's something viable, then I'm sure he will consider signing an extension. If he doesn't, then he'll probably go somewhere else, and I think that's okay. But yeah, and I, at the end, I heard at the very end, he kind of joked because he was at the Browns game on Sunday wearing a Lamar Jackson jersey, and I know that stuff doesn't go over well here in Cleveland, but he basically put it, he put it to rest like, hey, listen, guys, I went to school with this guy.
That's
like, he's a friend of mine. Right. Which I've always said, like, I don't care about that, but I know Cleveland fans get a little sensitive. So all I'm going to say is, if you want to convince him to stay, because he made it kind of a joke, tongue in cheek, like, I know you guys hate me already, but it was just because I'm friends with Lamar. Don't give him a reason to want to leave, is what I'm trying to get at here. Like, listen, if he wants to support Lamar Jackson and talk about how he likes New York because he grew up there, it's okay. Let's just let him play basketball and hope that the Cavs do well this season, and then he has plenty of reasons to stick around.